Caste in India. No escape.
Caste in India, no escape.
After decades of positive discrimination and despite huge demographic shifts, caste bias remains rife.
After decades of positive discrimination and despite huge demographic shifts, caste bias remains rife.
Ankit Pal and Tushar Singh have a few things in common.
Ankit Pal and Tushar Singh have a few things in common.
They're 19 and 18 years old respectively and live within a couple of hours' drive of Delhi, albeit in opposite directions.
They are 19 and 18 years old respectively, and they live within a couple of hours drive of Delhi, albeit in opposite directions.
They both happen to be Dalits from the bottom ranks of India's voluminous caste register.
They both happen to be Dalits from the bottom ranks of India's voluminous caste register.
And they have also both been in the news lately, though for very different reasons.
And they have both been in the news lately. And they've also both been in the news lately, though for very different reasons.
In mid-July, the smiling, bespectacled Mr. Singh won brief fame by scoring a flawless 100 out of 100 in each of 5 subjects in school leaving exams, the best marks in the country.
In mid-July, the smiling, bespectacled Mrs. Singh won brief fame by scoring a flawless 100 out of 100 in each of 5 subjects in school leaving exams, the best marks in the country.
He wants to study history, he told interviewers, and enter the Indian Administrative Service, the top echelon of the bureaucracy.
He wants to study history, he told interviewers, and entered the Indian Administrative Service, the top echelon of the bureaucracy.
Mr. Pal, in contrast, appeared wearing a pink shirt and grey trousers in a viral video last year in which 2 young men from the land-owning Jat caste force him to pull down his trousers and then beat him with a heavy stick.
Mr. Pal, in contrast, appeared wearing a pink shirt and grey trousers in a viral video last year, in which 2 young men from the landowning Jat caste forced him to pull down his trousers and then beat him with a heavy stick.
His tormentors were angry because Mr. Pal, having found a job in a factory making smartphone screens, refused to work their land or look after their cows, as Dalits in the Jat-dominated village have done for generations.
His tormentors were angry because Mr. Pal, having found a job in a factory making smartphone screens, refused to work their land or uh, look after their cows as Dalits in the Jat-dominated village have done for generations.
70 years ago, India's constitution, largely written by B.R. Ambedkar, a Dalit intellectual, declared all citizens equal before the law.
70 years ago, India's constitution, largely written by B.R. Ambedkar, a Dalit intellectual, declared all citizens equal before the law.
It abolished untouchability, making the Hindu practice a punishable offence, and enjoined the state to improve the lot of the weaker sections of society.
It abolished untouchability, making the Hindu practice a punishable offense, and enjoined the state to improve the lot of the weaker sections of society.
Dalit circumstances have indeed improved.
Dalit circumstances have indeed improved.
The rigid ritual shunning of them has largely faded.
The rigid ritual shunning of them has largely faded.
3 generations of quotas in legislative bodies, in state schools, and in government service have created a lower caste bourgeoisie, such that mid-ranked castes began lobbying for and eventually won their own reservations.
3 generations of quotas in legislative bodies, in state schools, and in government service
began lobbying for lower caste state schools and in government service have
created a lower caste bourgeoisie, such that mid-ranked castes began lobbying for and eventually won their reservations.
a lower caste bourgeoisie, such that mid-ranked castes began lobbying for and eventually won their own reservations. Caste-based parties have sprung up to agitate for more government help and won power in many states.
Caste-based parties have sprung up to agitate for more government help and won power in many states.
Given all this, the stellar success of Mr. Singh ought to be unremarkable, just as the casual violence and ritual humiliation inflicted on Mr. Pal ought to be unthinkable.
Given all this, the stellar success of Mr. Singh ought to be unremarkable, just as the casual violence and ritual humiliation inflicted on Mr. Pal ought to be unthinkable.
Yet Mr. Singh's caste, revealed by the proud portrait of Ambedkar in the young scholar's living room, was widely remarked upon.
Yet Mr. Singh's caste, revealed by the proud portrait of Ambedkar in the young scholar's living room, was largely remarked upon.
Mr. Singh is also unusual in that he attended a top private school.
Mr. Singh is also unusual in that he attended a top private school.
His parents are college teachers.
His parents are college teachers.
Mr. Pal's luck is of a different kind.
Mr. Pal's luck is of a different kind.
It is lucky that he, like many Dalits who have found ways to escape the only jobs previously open to them, such as sharecropping, waste removal, and tanning, no longer needs high caste positions.
It is lucky that he, like many Dalits who have found ways to escape the only jobs previously open to them, such as sharecropping, waste removal, or tanning, no longer needs high-cost patrons.
He is also lucky to be alive.
He is also lucky to be alive.
Few Hindus any longer observe strict ritual purity or consider Dalits literally untouchable.
Few Hindus any longer
Lucky to be alive. Few Hindus any longer observe strict ritual purity or consider Dalits literally untouchable.
Few Hindus any longer observe strict ritual purity or consider Dalits literally untouchable.
Even so, with dismal regularity, news stories tell of higher caste people maiming, raping, or murdering Dalits for such slights as daring to sport a moustache, ride a horse, or worst of all, woo someone above their station.
Yet, with dismal regularity, news stories tell of higher caste people maiming, raping, or murdering Dalits for such slights as daring to sport a mustache, ride a horse, or worst of all, woo someone above their station.
The persistence of discrimination is not limited to Hindus. An estimated 65% of discrimination is not limited to Hindus.
The persistence of discrimination is not limited to Hindus.
An estimated 65% of India's 20 million Catholics are former Dalits whose forebears converted in part to escape caste oppression.
An estimated 65% of India's 20 million Catholics are Dalits, whose forebears converted in part to escape caste oppression.
Yet, according to the Indian Church's most recent published record, out of 27,000 priests, only 5% were of Dalit origin, and not a single one of its 6 cardinals and 30 archbishops.
Yet, according to the Indian Church's most recent record, out of 27,000 priests,
7,000, according to the Indian Church's most recent published record,
out of 27,000 priests, not a single, only 5% were of Dalit origin, and not a single one of the 6 cardinals and 30 archbishops.
Among India's
Among India's 14% Muslim minority, a similar unspoken distinction persists.
Separating families that converted in the distant past or were associated with ruling Muslim dynasties from the larger mass imputed to have converted as a way of erasing their previous, presumably lowly caste status.
Among India's 14% Muslim minority, a similar unspoken distinction persists. Separating families who converted in the distant past or were associated with ruling Muslim dynasties from families converted from the larger mass imputed to have converted as a way of erasing their previous, presumably lowly caste status.
And although reservations have secured plum posts for some, lower caste uplift has been limited.
And although reservations have secured plum posts for some, a low caste uplift has been limited.
Accelerated economic growth from 1990 to 2010 pulled tens of millions out of poverty, including many of low caste. But overall inequality between rich and poor, including within caste groups, has grown.
Accelerated economic growth between 1990 to 2010 pulled tens of millions out of poverty, including many of low caste. Inequality between rich and poor, including within caste groups, has grown.
Inequality between rich and poor, including within caste groups, has grown. Moreover, in the government as in the private sector, the highest positions remain a near monopoly for the three top tiers of Varnas of the broader caste pyramid. The Brahmins or priestly class, the Kshatriyas or warrior class, and the Vaishyas or merchant class, who between them account for perhaps 20% of India's 1.3 billion people.
Moreover, in the government as in the private sector,
Or word pyramid, or the private sector groups has grown. Moreover, in the government
as in the private sector, the highest positions remain near monopoly.